So I'm walking up the west shore of Windermere today, up to Ambleside. It's one of my favourite walks. It's got a lot of variety in it because you start off going across the lake on the ferry and you finish the walk by coming back on one of the paddle steamers or little pleasure boats basically that run up and down the lake, and it just makes for a lot of variety, a bit of luxury really. It's a very relaxing walk and it's one I used to do with the kids a lot, so I can't like doing it just to replay all those old memories. When I came across on the ferry, they said that the wind's getting up today and the ferry might not be working later on in the day, but fortunately, since I'm walking up the shore and coming back by a different route, I should be okay. It's looking absolutely gorgeous today. So what I wanted to talk about today was the fact that most people think that I'm very organised, and I get that impression because some small aspects of my life, maybe 1 hour or 2 hours a week of my life, are quite organised. But the reason that they're so organised is because I just really rebel against the concept of being organised. I am a real freedom junkie. I really don't like to decide what I'm going to do each day almost until the evening of the previous day, and sometimes not even till I wake up in the morning. Now, to understand why I'm such a freedom junkie, you need to know a little bit about my backstory. So I had quite a challenging autoimmune condition for close to 20 years, and as a result of that I never really knew how I was going to be from day to day, and to some extent from hour to hour. So I could definitely go to sleep feeling great and wake up hardly able to move my legs, and I could get in a car and drive for an hour and be fine, but by the time I got to my destination, be unable to move my arms. I could start talking and giving a business speech, and by the end of it be unable to move my jaw. So it was all a bit of a challenge, and as a result of that, freedom became one of the driving forces in my life. The one thing I was really seeking was the freedom to do what I felt like doing when I felt like doing it. And because I would very rarely know when that was going to be, I didn't want any schedule or structure in my life. I just wanted to respond to the world as I found it and as my body allowed me to enjoy it or otherwise. So that's the freedom part. The organisation part comes a lot from the fact that I have quite an unusual brain. There are two major deficits, maybe three. So the first thing is that I have very extremely poor recall of facts and figures. And so if I want to ever be able to recall those, I have to write them down. I'm also unable to think of anything in relative terms, and I almost have a panic attack when I even try to think about that. So if I try to think out of one date relative to another date, or one measurement of something relative to another thing, things like daylight saving time, what's changing there? 1 hour is moving in I can't even think about it. My brain just stops at that point when I try to even describe what daylight saving time is. So that's another deficit. And the third one, which is very relevant to this, is that I have no visual memory at all. So if I close my eyes, it's just black. If I try to recall the faces of my children or my wife, or places that I love, my family home, whatever it is, I just get nothing. There's just nothing there. I have no visual memory. So actually I just realised that I misspoke there, and that when I said I have no visual memory, what I actually mean is I have no visual recall. So I can't consciously recall a visual image, but I do recognise things that I've seen before when I see them again. I can recall, strangely enough, things that aren't real, but things that are real I can't recall. So as I said, people, places, things in the real world. But I can strangely recall photographs of those things, but only in the most kind of vague terms. And as a result of those three deficits, in order to function in the world, I've had to kind of organise a few aspects of my life. I do need to keep records of things. I do need to keep, all the facts and figures in gardening sense, planting dates, what I'm sowing, when, records of what happened in the past. That's why I keep a video diary, and that's why I started doing YouTube, so I could recall what my plot looks like. I can't even, visualise where my beds are, what's in each bed, things like that, without a photographic or video record of them. But what I am good at is remembering and working with concepts, developing concepts, seeing connections between things. Oh, it's windy up here. My brain is constantly dragging me off in new directions, and so I'm always completely kind of disorganised. I can't keep on a single topic for more than a few hours before I get distracted by something. Just as an aside, this is the favourite swimming spot for me and the kids when they were younger, and we used to picnic just here. So maybe you can see that when people say to me that I'm very organised, it kind of makes me laugh. And so how do I think of myself? Well, most important, I think of myself as strategic. And that means that I have a kind of vision for the way I want to live my life, and I have some pretty clear but flexible objectives for what I want to achieve in the next few years. And I try to make sure that I live my life in a fairly resilient way, so that I can still achieve those objectives even in the face of all the uncertainties that exist in the world. So in addition to living a pretty strategic life, I also like to be pretty effective. And by effective I mean trying to do the right things at the right times, and not necessarily that efficiently. Effective just means, as I say, the right thing at the right time in order to move me in the direction of my objectives. So one of the really important aspects of being effective is to understand the difference between urgent and important. And all too often your mind is drawn to focus on the urgent when really it should be focusing on the important. But then I like a life that is minimally planned. So whilst I'm very keen on milestones and knowing what the relationship between those milestones is and when those milestones need to be achieved, the actual day-to-day schedule for achieving those milestones that lead to those objectives is, for me, needs to be incredibly flexible. And part of that is delivered by technology and allowing me to kind of work on whatever I want, wherever I want. Basically as effectively as I can. And actually, when I was at work, I'm retired now, spent 20 years working to make engineers mainly, and consultants, scientists, people like that, as effective as they possibly could be, looking at all the kind of personality traits of those sorts of people, looking at the type of work that they did and how to make that more effective, looking at the sort of IT tools that they used, how to simplify their lives, how to motivate them, and all those sorts of things. And so I applied a lot of those lessons to my own life. And that's why, for example, I'm out on a hike and also recording a video, a way of stacking multiple objectives together and getting more done. And I also learned, particularly in my 20 years of autoimmune disease, to live a life that required minimal discipline. Just getting out of bed and doing the basics of life requires a lot of discipline when you're in a lot of pain, on a lot of medication, experiencing a lot of brain fog and all those sorts of things associated with autoimmune conditions. And I didn't have much discipline left, which meant that I needed to design my life in such a way that it was very easy, very motivating and relaxing, and I kind of minimised all the things that I disliked. I tried to eliminate every annoyance from my life, for example, because I had plenty of challenges to deal with already. I didn't want any more. I carried that forward to gardening. Every year, Debbie and I try and eliminate all the kind of annoyances in life, watering, weeding, all these sorts of non-productive activities, unproductive travel backwards and forwards to the allotment, things like that. And so we're trying to be as effective, minimally disciplined and minimally planned as I can. My lips aren't working very well today because it's very cold. So in addition to being pretty effective, I also like to be really efficient, but only efficient in a way that the things that don't matter. So I'm very efficient at cleaning house, at ironing, at the basics of gardening, things like bed prep, sowing seeds, planting, things like that. And I try to not think about efficiency at all in things that I really love doing. So harvesting, being with friends and family, leisure time, exercise, those sorts of things where I focus on maximising enjoyment rather than maximising efficiency. But by getting the efficiency right, there's loads of time for those things, so I don't have to worry. And I'm also a massive believer in the concept of slack. And it might seem ridiculously simple, this, but I think it's one of the most important things that I learnt a long time ago, 20, maybe 30 years ago, that if you have a bit of extra time and a bit of extra money and a bit of extra energy and basically a bit of extra of all the resources that you need in life, then life is very smooth and easy. And as soon as you have a bit less time than you need, a bit less money than you need, a bit less energy than you need, life suddenly becomes incredibly difficult. And so if you organise your life in such a way that you've always got slack, then everything is a lot easier. And you might ask, well, when you've got an autoimmune condition, and in my case I was only working 10-15 hours a week, something like that, and had a lot to do and a lot of responsibility, responsible for the strategy of a very large organisation, about 7,000 people, and also product management and program management and all sorts of other responsibilities. How did I still have slack in my life then? Well, the way that I did that was just eliminate all those little annoyances, all those status meetings and all that reporting and all those presentations given multiple times to multiple audiences. And that's where I started doing video. I would record presentations, and then if I had to deliver them more than once, people just watched the video. And that's when I started blogging, so that I could constantly just refer people to articles that I'd written, rather than constantly rewriting stuff in emails and things like that. So that was part of the efficiency, but it also meant that even when I didn't have very much time, I still had a little bit more time than I needed. So then I finally come to Organised, and there are a few aspects of my life that are organised. So I am a fairly good record keeper because of my poor memory. I do have a fairly good idea of what my objectives are and how I'm going to achieve them because I'm strategic. And I do have a kind of nice diary of my life in several forms, again because of my very poor memory, but also a lot of visual diary materials because I've got no visual memory. And because I don't like to plan very much in my life, I do spend short focused periods planning so that I get it out of the way. And I've developed my own tools to plan the allotment and things like that, which allow me to easily cut and paste data from year to year, easily refine it. Those tools are very visual to help me with my visual memory impairment, and it's not a very good idea to be recording a video when you're climbing a hill. So my favourite time to get the organising done is in winter, and that takes two forms. One, kind of a rough outline, advanced plans, things like that, but also automation. And I really like to automate organising related things out of my life. And you can imagine that's as simple as paying the bills by direct debit and things like that. But also I have many other things that are automated in terms of like automated record keeping and automated tracking and trend analysis, things like that, about aspects of my life to keep me on track. And that sort of automating, which is kind of a bit like organising, I really enjoy, because I know that I'm just putting an hour or two of creative effort into eliminating something that I don't like doing for years on end. And of course most of that automating gets done on rainy days when I've got, I might have something better to do, but I don't have many things that are better to do, and so it's fairly easy to motivate myself to do those And I generally motivate myself by doing something that I really like before them and something that I really like after them. And for me that tends to be going to my health club in the morning, then doing a bit of automating for a couple of hours by the pool, and then maybe getting out for a nice walk and a good dinner at lunchtime. And so the last thing on my kind of productivity list, I suppose you might call it, is having good default routines. And again, this is something that I learned in my autoimmune days, which thankfully is kind of in remission now. And I did do a video about how I managed to achieve that. But default routines were great. You know, these are the things that got me out of bed in the morning and got me through the day. And they were always kind of good, healthy, default things to do when I couldn't think of anything better to do, or I couldn't motivate myself to do anything better. And I've talked about a few of these in the past, but a great example of that would be getting out and going for a walk and arriving at one of my favourite morning cafes and having a great breakfast and talking to the regulars and doing some reading and research, something that was a really great way to start the morning. It was default, it was a habit, and whilst there's lots of other things that I might do in the morning, if I couldn't think of anything better to do, that's what I fell into, that well-trodden habit that was very easy to motivate myself to do. And another example might be going and having a sauna, which is something that I really liked to do when I was in a lot of pain. And once you're in the sauna and in your swimming trunks, it's then pretty easy to motivate yourself to go and have a swim, for example. So again, that's another great little kind of default routine that I like to do in the afternoons. And of course I had to walk to the health club, and when you walk to the health club you get a chance to enjoy some spectacular sunsets, and when you walk to the morning cafe you get to enjoy some spectacular sunrises. And again, that's all part of a nice default motivating routine. So I have actually written all this up in probably a much more coherent way for anybody that wants to really understand how all these aspects of my life fit together and how useful they are if you're struggling with challenges at work or with your body, in your personal life or whatever, how you can get a lot done, get the right things done, work towards a strategy, and particularly if you're struggling with not really being very organised and not really liking to follow a schedule or be guided by a plan, how you can still be, you know, moderately successful in life. So my name's Steve. This is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment video channel, and it's also a bonus episode of the Gardening Week podcast. See you soon.